At 3:30 in the afternoon, Huo Yunting was busy in the kitchen. The butter had just melted in the frying pan. He gently placed the marinated silver cod into it. A sizzling sound rose, and a rich aroma filled the air. He hummed an off-key tune in a very good mood. Today was Friday. Nianan's preschool would let out early. The driver, old Joe, would drop her off at the Su Group building so she could see her mother, Su Wanqing. Huo Yunting knew Su Wanqing probably would not have time for their daughter, but Nianan was always happy to see her mother. As long as his daughter was happy, he was happy. The oven timer dinged. Huo Yunting put on oven mitts and took out the golden, bubbling potato and cheese bake. He was just about to plate it when he suddenly heard the front door swing open. There were no happy footsteps. There was no daily shout of "Daddy, I'm home." Huo Yunting put down the plate and turned around. His 5-year-old daughter, Huo Nianan, stood in the entryway like a little bird drenched by the rain. The pink and white princess dress she was wearing, the one he had helped her put on this morning, her favorite, was now covered in dark brown stains. It looked like someone had thrown something at her. Her small face was deathly pale. 2 tear tracks clung to her cheeks. Her eyes were red and swollen, her lashes clumped together wetly. Her whole body was trembling. Her shoulders shook with little sobs, as if she had just been through a massive crying fit. Huo Yunting felt like his heart had been seized in someone's fist. He rushed over in 3 big strides, crouched down and pulled his daughter into his arms. His voice trembled uncontrollably. "Nian, what's wrong? Who hurt you?" Huo Nianan, finally in her father's embrace, could no longer hold back the grievances she had bottled up the whole way home. She burst into heart-wrenching sobs, crying so hard she could barely breathe. She buried her face in Huo Yunting's shoulder. Her hot, wet tears immediately soaked through his t-shirt. "Daddy!" It was Mr. Gao from Mummy's office. He was so mean. Huo Yunting held his daughter, gently patting her back, patiently waiting for her to catch her breath. Between broken, hiccuping sentences, he pieced together the story. The preschool had a fire drill that afternoon and let out early. The driver, old Joe, took Nianan to the Su Group building as usual. Nianan wanted to surprise her mother, so she did not let the receptionist call up. She took the elevator to the top floor herself. She stepped out of the elevator carrying a drawing she had made in class, a picture of her father, mother, and herself holding hands under the sun. She was running too excited, and at the corner she bumped straight into a man walking toward her. The man was holding a cup of coffee. The brown liquid spilled all over him. Nianan was terrified. She recognized the man. It was her mother's assistant, Mr. Gao Jun. She quickly bent over and started apologizing over and over. Her little face flushed bright red with shame. Gao Jun did not forgive her. Right there in the hallway, in front of dozens of employees on the entire floor, he roared at her like a raging beast. "Where did this wild child come from? Are you blind? Do you know how much this suit costs? How did your parents raise you? You have no manners, you little brat." Nianan was petrified. She was only 5 years old. She had never been screamed at like that before. She stood frozen, her whole body shaking. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she was too scared to cry out loud. Gao Jun was not done after yelling. Still furious, he reached out, grabbed Nianan's thin arm hard, and pushed her down. "Kneel. This isn't over until you kneel and apologize to me today." Nianan struggled and cried. She could not form a complete sentence. She just kept repeating, I'm sorry, over and over. Her tiny body desperately shrank back. She did not understand why she had to kneel. Her preschool teacher said if you do something wrong, you apologize, but no one had ever taught her that an apology required kneeling. More and more people gathered around. No one stepped forward. No one said a word. Everyone watched as this grown man grabbed a 5-year-old girl by the shoulders and tried to force her to her knees. The spectacle only ended when Su Wanqing walked out of her meeting. Su Wanqing saw the crowd gathered in the hallway and frowned. She walked over, saw her own assistant scolding her own daughter, and just said flatly, "That's enough. Have old Joe take her home." She did not ask her daughter what happened. She did not ask if her daughter was hurt. She did not even hug her daughter. She did not give her daughter a second glance. After she said that, she turned around and walked away. The sound of her high heels on the floor was sharp and utterly cold. After hearing his daughter's story, Huo Yunting felt like something was lodged in his chest. He looked down at Nian Nian's arm. On the small, thin arm were several red finger marks left by Gao Jun when he grabbed her. A searing rage ignited deep inside him, spreading through his blood to his very limbs. But he could not scare his daughter. He forced down all his emotion. He cupped his daughter's small face in his hands and gently wiped away her tears with his thumbs. His touch was very light, very gentle, as if he were cleaning a priceless treasure. "Nian, Nian," his voice was soft but firm. "Tell Daddy, did you do something wrong?" Huo Nianan shook her head vigorously. Tears started falling again. "I didn't mean to. I really didn't mean to. I said sorry. I said sorry to him so many times." "Okay." That was the only word Huo Yunting said. He did not lose his temper in front of his daughter. He carried her to the sofa, put on her favorite cartoon, and brought her favorite little cake from the fridge with a glass of warm milk. He set them before her. "Nian, Nian, be good. Watch some cartoons for a bit. Daddy needs to make a phone call. I'll be right back." Huo Nianan hugged her little bunny stuffed animal on the sofa. Her sobbing gradually subsided, her eyes fixed on the TV screen as the cartoon characters began to distract her. "Whoa!" Yunting watched her quiet down, then turned and walked into his study, gently closing the door behind him. The study was very quiet. The setting sun filtered through the slats of the blinds, casting stripes of light and shadow onto the floor. He walked to his desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. The drawer was locked. He had not opened it in 3 years. The lock clicked open, the sound crisp and light. Inside was a single item, a pure black phone with no brand markings, its body as smooth as a mirror. It was an encrypted satellite phone. There was only one number in the contacts list. Huo Yunting looked at the phone, his fingertip pausing over the screen for 2 seconds. Then he pressed the dial button. The call was picked up almost instantly. "Sir," a steady, respectful male voice came through the receiver. "Li Feng." Huo Yunting leaned back in his chair, his voice so calm it held not a ripple of emotion. "In the 3 years I've been away, has the Su family forgotten who they are?" On the other end of the line, Li Feng did not answer. He could hear it. Hidden behind his employer's words was a volcano about to erupt. "Pull all files on the Su group. Send them to me within half an hour." Huo Yunting said, "I want their financial reports for the past 5 years, the equity structure, the partner list, every ongoing project. In detail." "Yes, sir." Li Feng did not ask why. He did not ask what needed to be done. He answered crisply and hung up. Huo Yunting put down the phone and looked out the window. The Su group, the Su family. 3 years ago, old Master Su had gripped his hand from his sickbed, tears streaming down his face. "Yunting, I leave the Su family to you. Wanqing, she has too much pride, and her methods are not enough. Promise me, protect her." He had promised. For these 3 years, he had retreated to the background, put away all his sharp edges, and lived quietly as a full-time father. He cooked for his daughter, took her to school, and put her to bed. He never meddled in the Su group's affairs, because Su Wanqing did not like it. She hated him interfering in the company, hated him having any presence at all, hated anyone knowing he was her husband. He did not care. As long as his daughter grew up healthy and happy, he could swallow any grievance. But today they had crossed his bottom line. A darkness flickered in Huo Yunting's eyes. "Su Wanqing," he muttered to himself, his voice cold like the bitter wind of deep winter. If you can't control your own dog, don't blame me for doing it for you. Outside the window, the sun was slowly sinking beneath the horizon. The entire city of Jiangzhou was lighting up, bustling with traffic, as prosperous as ever. No one knew that a storm about to engulf this city's business empire was silently brewing right here in this small study. Only the ticking of the clock remained in the study. 20 minutes later, the computer screen in front of Huo Yunting lit up. An encrypted email popped in. Li Feng's efficiency was as precise as always. He paged through the files on the Su Group. The Su Group, one of the top 3 business empires in Jiangzhou City, spanned real estate, finance, and retail. Total assets exceeded 80 billion yuan. When Su Wanqing took over the company from her grandfather, the media called her the Iron Lady of Jiangzhou's business world. Over the past 3 years, she continuously expanded its territory. The company's market value doubled, and for a time, she was unstoppable. Huo Yunting finished reviewing the documents, his face expressionless. To outsiders, this empire seemed colossal. In his eyes, it was merely a chessboard he could overturn at any time. He picked up the black phone and dialed the second call of the day. This time he called Su Wanqing. The phone rang for a long time. Once, twice, 3 times. It rang a full 8 times. Just before it would disconnect, she finally picked up. "What is it?" Su Wanqing's voice was cold as ice, laced with unconcealed impatience. "I'm in a board meeting. Make it quick." Huo Yunting ignored her tone. His voice was flat, like the surface of a frozen lake, bottomless and revealing no emotion. "Is your board meeting important?" he asked. The question seemed to throw her off. She paused, then let out a scoff. "A multi-billion-dollar merger. Is it important?" Her tone dripped with contempt. "You, a man who cooks at home all day, what would you know about it?" A soft laugh escaped Huo Yunting's lips. There was not a shred of warmth in that laugh. "Su Wanqing," he said, enunciating each word. "I hear your Su family calls the shots in Jiangzhou. Then listen carefully." He paused. His voice became a knife, slowly pushing through the telephone line. "Today I will tear down everything you have built with my own hands." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Before Su Wanqing could respond, Huo Yunting had already hung up. He put the phone back in the drawer and locked it. Then he stood up, walked out of the study, and a gentle smile returned to his face. In the living room, Nian was still curled up on the sofa. The little cake was half-eaten, cream smeared at the corner of her mouth. Her eyes were glued to the cartoon pig on the TV. Nian, what do you want for dinner tonight?" Huo Yunting walked over and sat next to her. His tone was completely different from a moment ago. "Daddy's sweet and sour ribs." Nian's eyes immediately lit up at the mention of food. The earlier hurt seemed to be mostly forgotten. "Okay. How about some corn and pork rib soup, too?" "Yes." "And rice." "All right." Huo Yunting ruffled her hair. "You play by yourself for a bit. Daddy will go cook. After dinner, we'll build Legos together. That castle from yesterday isn't finished yet." Nian nodded happily. Huo Yunting walked into the kitchen, put on his apron, and turned on the faucet to wash his hands. Outside, the sun had completely set. Night fell like a giant black velvet cloth, slowly covering Jiangzhou City. He looked at the myriad lights outside the window. The tenderness in his eyes gradually faded, replaced by a profound, bottomless cold. He picked up another phone hanging on the wall and sent a text message. Just 4 words. "Let it begin." At the same moment, in the financial center of Jiangzhou City, the conference room on the top floor of the Su Group building was brightly lit. Su Wanqing sat in the main seat. Complex financial statements and merger plans were projected onto the screen in front of her. A dozen senior executives sat around the long table, deep in heated discussion about the acquisition details. But she was not listening. Her mind kept replaying Huo Yunting's words from the phone call. "Today, I will tear down everything you have built with my own hands." That man's voice. She had known it for 3 years. It was always gentle, compliant, even somewhat timid. He always spoke softly and looked at her with a hint of caution. She had silently despised him countless times, a man with no ambition, a man content to be cooped up in the kitchen, a man living off the Su family. But that voice just now, cold, low, like a blade scraping across glass, she almost didn't recognize it. Was that Huo Yunting? Her husband? President Su. Her assistant Gao Jun reminded her quietly from the side. Everyone's opinions are mostly aligned. Would you like to? Su Wanqing snapped back to reality and rubbed her temples. She was probably just too tired. Huo Yunting. What ability did he have? He was probably going stir-crazy staying home with the kid and wanted to scare her on a whim. A man with no job, how could he dismantle an $80 billion empire? With his walk. She sneered inwardly and cast that absurd thought completely out of her mind. The meeting concluded at 5:45 in the afternoon. Just as Su Wanqing was preparing to gather her things and leave, the conference room door was suddenly flung open. The man who rushed in was the chief financial officer, Zhang Zhicheng. This old finance veteran over 50 and used to storms was now ghostly pale. His forehead was beaded with sweat. He clutched a tablet in his hands, his knuckles trembling. President Su, we have a situation. His voice exploded like a thunderclap in the quiet room. What's the emergency? Su Wanqing frowned. Our stock price. Someone is shorting us heavily. Zhang Zhicheng shoved the tablet in front of her. The screen showed a green line plunging almost vertically. It started 10 minutes ago. A massive amount of capital came in, buying up our short positions without any regard for cost. Our stock is already down 12%, and it's accelerating. The room instantly erupted. All the executives pulled out their phones. Every single face changed color. What? 12% in 10 minutes? That's impossible. Capital movement of this scale, we would have had some warning. Who did this? Is it someone from Ruifeng? Su Wanqing stared at the line still crashing downwards, her face ashen. Gao Jun butted in from the side. Don't worry, President Su. It's definitely those rivals making small moves. I'll contact the brokers right away to stabilize. Shut up. Su Wanqing cut him off coldly. She forced herself to calm down, her mind racing. A 12% drop, though brutal, was still something the Su Group's size could temporarily withstand. The immediate priority was to find the adversary. Activate countermeasures immediately. She began giving orders. Mobilize reserve funds to support the market and find out where this capital is coming from. Before she could finish, the marketing director's phone rang. He answered it. After listening for less than 10 seconds, his entire face turned white. Immediately after the phones of the legal director, the operations director, the investment director, a dozen senior executives started ringing simultaneously, as if on cue. For a moment, the conference room was filled with shrill, chaotic ringtones. Su Wanqing watched this scene. A chill rose from the soles of her feet. The marketing director was the first to hang up. His voice trembled. President Su Wanqing Capital just unilaterally announced the termination of cooperation with us. All projects under construction are being divested. The legal director followed, reporting Jintai Properties sent a lawyer's letter. They want to dissolve the strategic partnership agreement. The operations director sounded like he was about to cry. President Su, our biggest supplier, Shengyuan Holdings, notified us they are cutting off supply effective immediately. They said they are willing to pay the penalty for breach of contract. One piece of bad news after another crashed down like sledgehammers. Su Wanqing stood frozen, her body rigid. Wanqing Capital, Jintai Properties, Shenyuan Holdings. These were partners who had worked with the Su Group for over a decade. They were the very core foundation of the Su family's business empire. Their ties were not just about profit, but intricate webs of favors, resources, and promises. Yet just now, in the span of 10 minutes simultaneously, Together, without any warning, they had all chosen to tear up their contracts. This was no business competition. This was not even a hostile takeover. This was someone using unimaginable, colossal power to rip her empire out by its roots. The voice of Huo Yunting suddenly echoed in her mind. Today, I will tear down everything you have built with my own hands. The lights in the conference room seemed to dim. She grabbed the table edge to steady herself, her fingertips ice cold. Outside the window, Zhangzhou City's night was thick. A tsunami that would engulf the entire financial world had already begun. No one would be left untouched. At 6 o'clock sharp, the stock market closed. Su Group's stock price had dropped 31% in a single day. Dead silence fell over the conference room. No one spoke. The dozen senior executives stared at the screens in front of them. The expressions on their faces shifted from shock to panic, then from panic to numbness. Someone loosened his tie. Someone kept wiping sweat. Someone simply collapsed in his chair, as if all the air had been let out. What did a single-day drop of 31% mean? It meant that in just a few hours, the Su Group's market value had evaporated by a total of 32 billion yuan. The fortune accumulated by 3 generations of the Su family had been sliced away by a third by an invisible knife. Su Wanqing sat in the main seat. Her hands were folded on her lap, her nails digging deep into her palms. Her face held no expression. Her spine was ramrod straight. She could not collapse. She was the head of the Su Group, the pillar for everyone in this room. If she fell, the Su family would truly be finished. But only she knew her hands were shaking. Not from anger. From fear. 30 minutes earlier, her CFO Zhang Zicheng had told her that the shorting capital had already retreated. It came suddenly and left just as cleanly. The opponent's manipulation was incredibly sophisticated, as precise as a surgical strike. Smash the market, harvest, exit. Every step was taken at the absolute limit of the market's reaction speed, without wasting a single penny, and without leaving any traceable tracks. In other words, the opponent was not doing this for money. They simply wanted to hit you. After striking, they turned and left, like crushing an ant, casually, contemptuously, not even bothering to look back. Have you found out who it is? Su Wanqing's voice was a little hoarse. Zhang Zicheng shook his head, his face ashen. We can't trace it. The funds went through at least 6 layers of offshore shell companies. Our people can't follow the trail at all. An operation of this level. He paused, then forced out the rest of the sentence. There aren't many institutions domestically with this capability. The conference room door suddenly swung open again. The person who walked in was Su Wanqing's second uncle, Su Zhenghong. He was the vice chairman of the Su Group, the most influential person in the Su family besides Su Wanqing. Behind him were 3 other relatives from the Su clan, all board members. Every one of them had a grim look on their face. Wanqing, what on earth is going on? Su Zhenghong demanded as soon as he entered, his tone full of suppressed fury. I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. Why didn't you answer your phone? Su Wanqing looked up at him and said nothing. Her phone had not stopped ringing since 4 o'clock. Shareholders, directors, clan elders, reporters, every call was an interrogation. She answered a few, then muted her phone and left it on the table. I don't have time to explain right now, she said. The top priority is... Top priority, Su Zhenghong slammed his hand on the table, his voice rising sharply. Do you have any idea how furious the elders are? The empire your grandfather built with his own hands, in your hands for 3 years, and a third of it is gone in a single day. You have to give us an explanation. Su Wanqing stood up abruptly, glaring at Su Zhenghong. Her eyes were sharp and icy, like a poisoned blade. Second uncle, if you make a scene with me right now, will the stock price go back up? Her voice was not loud, but it choked off Su Zhenghong's words. 32 billion is already gone. Instead of questioning me here, think about how we stabilize what's left tomorrow. Su Zhenghong was rendered speechless, his face cycling between shades of green and white. The relatives behind him exchanged glances and dared not speak further. Su Wanqing pulled her gaze back and looked at everyone in the room. Today's meeting is adjourned. Every department prepare contingency plans tonight. We reconvene at 8 tomorrow morning. She paused, and from this moment on, everyone maintains a unified statement to the outside world. Su Group's operations are normal. The stock fluctuation is a normal market correction. The executives murmured their assent and began leaving the room, one after another. As they walked out, each one had their head down, footsteps hurried, as if fleeing a burning building. Soon only Su Wanqing and her assistant Gao Jun were left. Gao Jun stood in the corner, wringing his hands nervously, too afraid to approach. He had heard this afternoon that Huo Nianan's father had called. Though he did not know exactly what that call was about, his gut told him that today's disaster was connected to that incident. Su Wanqing did not look at him. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, folded her arms, and gazed out at Jiangzhou City. Under the night sky, the city was still brilliantly lit. In the office building opposite, white-collar workers were still working overtime. On the distant bridge across the river, traffic flowed like ribbons of light. Everything still looked as prosperous and stable as usual, but her world was collapsing. The phone on the conference table lit up again. She walked over and glanced at it, an unfamiliar landline number. She pressed answer and said nothing. "President Su, hello there." A man's voice came from the other end, laced with a lazy, amused tone. "Was the show today entertaining?" Su Wanqing's pupils constricted sharply. "Who are you?" "Who I am isn't important." The other party chuckled. "What is important is that someone asked me to deliver a message to you." Su Wanqing gripped the phone tightly, her knuckles white. "What message?" He said, "This is just the beginning." The man's voice became meaningful. "He doesn't need your money. What he wants is for the Su family to kneel." The call ended. The busy signal beeped hollowly in her ear. Su Wanqing stood there motionless, phone in hand. The words just spoken were almost identical to what Gao Jun had said when forcing her daughter to kneel. Kneel. She suddenly remembered what Huo Yunting had said during that afternoon call. "Today I will tear down everything you have built with my own hands." She started trembling. This time, it was not just her hands. Her entire body was shaking. Gao Jun cautiously spoke up. "President Su, are you all right? Should I drive you home?" "Get out." Su Wanqing's voice was very low. "President Su," I said, "get out." She spun around, her voice suddenly shrill, as if trying to scream something out of her chest. Gao Jun jumped in fright and scrambled out of the conference room, pulling the door shut behind him. Su Wanqing was left alone in the vast room. She slowly crouched down, her back against the cold window glass, and buried her face in her knees. She could not make sense of it. Huo Yunting, her husband, the man who had not even raised his voice in 3 years. The man she had looked down on, thought so useless. The man who never wore clothes worth more than 100 yuan. Did he have this kind of power? If he did, why had he hidden it for 3 years? If he didn't, then who was behind all of this? Her thoughts were a tangled mess. A terrifying notion slowly surfaced. What if it really was Huo Yunting? What if the kept man of 3 years had been nothing but a lie from beginning to end? Then all the arrogance, coldness, and disdain she had displayed in this marriage, in his eyes, did she look like a ridiculous clown? Had he been watching from the sidelines all along, finding it laughable? At this thought, Su Wanqing's face burned as if on fire. Fear and shame intertwined, coiling around her heart like 2 venomous snakes. She wanted to go home. She wanted to ask him face to face, "Was it you?" But she did not dare. She knew that if it was truly him, the man she would face upon returning was not the husband she knew at all. It would be a complete stranger, a man who could tear the Su family to shreds in an instant. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message. She tapped it open. There were just a few simple words on the screen. This was only day 1. When the sun rises tomorrow, the Su family name will cease to exist. Sender, Huo Yunting. Su Wanqing's hand went limp. The phone fell with a crack, its screen shattering into a spiderweb. Outside the window, Jiangzhou was a sea of lights. The most powerful woman in the city, alone in the empty conference room, trembled uncontrollably. Finally, she covered her face and wept. And on the other side of the city, Huo Yunting was sitting on the living room carpet, building a Lego castle with his daughter. On the wall, the TV was tuned to a financial channel. The anchor was reporting the Su Group's stock plunge with a solemn voice. Huo Yunting looked up, glanced at the TV, then went back to fiddling with the blocks in her hands. "Daddy, the TV is talking about Mummy's company." Huo Yunting gently placed a roof piece on the castle and smiled. "Is it?" Daddy didn't notice. He picked up the remote and casually switched to a cartoon channel. On the screen, a family of pink piglets was jumping in mud puddles. His daughter giggled happily. Huo Yunting ruffled her hair, his eyes full of tenderness. Outside the window, the night over Jiangzhou City was impenetrably deep. Su Wanqing did not sleep a wink all night. She sat in the conference room from the late night until dawn. Her phone screen was shattered, but she couldn't be bothered to pick it up. The coffee on the table had gone cold, untouched. All the lights in the Su Group building were off, except for the lone light on her floor like an island drifting on a dark sea. She was waiting for the dawn, and waiting to gather enough courage. At 5:40 in the morning, the first light of day broke through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Su Wanqing stood up. Her legs had gone numb. She steadied herself on the edge of the table for a long moment. Then she walked into the restroom and splashed cold water on her face. The woman in the mirror had a sallow complexion, dark circles under her eyes, and her meticulously styled hair was half undone. She stared at herself for 3 seconds, then turned and walked out of the building. Her driver was already waiting downstairs. After getting in the car, she said just one sentence: "Take me home." 3 years. She had never come home at 6 in the morning. She was always the first to leave and the last to return. Sometimes for an entire week. Nian wouldn't see her once. She used to think this was only natural. She was the head of the Su Group. Her time belonged to the company, to the shareholders, to a business worth tens of billions. As for her daughter, that was what Huo Yunting was for. The car drove through the empty streets of Jiangzhou, past rows of shops not yet open, past elderly people out for morning exercise, past children with backpacks heading to school. Su Wanqing looked out the window. For the first time, she found this city so unfamiliar. She had lived in this city for 28 years and controlled one of its largest business empires. Yet, sitting in the car at this moment, she suddenly realized she didn't even know which direction her daughter's preschool gate faced. 20 minutes later, the car stopped in front of the villa, registered in her name but rarely visited. Su Wanqing got out and stood before the door. She had pushed open this door countless times in 3 years, each time with a condescending attitude like a benefactor entering a beneficiary's territory. But today, her hand on the handle actually hesitated. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The aroma of fried eggs and toast hit her. The living room lights were a warm yellow shining on the natural wood floors. The whole space was bathed in a cozy glow. Huo Yunting was standing in the open kitchen, wearing that cartoon apron she had found so irritating for 3 years, holding a spatula, frying eggs. Nian was sitting at the dining table, her 2 little legs swinging back and forth. In front of her were a glass of milk and 2 slices of toast spread with strawberry jam. Nian saw her first. The little girl's mouth moved. She instinctively wanted to call out "Mommy," but the word stuck in her throat. She quickly lowered her head and took small sips of her milk, pretending not to see. Su Wanqing's heart felt like it had been pricked by a needle. Nian had never treated her like this before. No matter if she responded or not, her daughter would always run over happily to hug her legs. Huo Yunting did not turn around, but it was as if he had known she was standing there all along. His voice drifted from the kitchen, as casual as commenting on the weather. "You're back." Su Wanqing stood in the entryway. All the questions, anger and fear she had prepared suddenly got stuck in her throat upon smelling this familiar homey scent. She looked at this man's back. It was still the same back, wearing a cheap white t-shirt, that ridiculous apron, his shoulders relaxed, exactly the same as every day for the past 3 years. But she no longer dared to find it amusing. "Was it you?" She finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse, as if her throat was full of sand. Huo Yunting turned off the stove, placed the fried egg onto a plate, brought it to Nian, and used a napkin to wipe the corner of her mouth. Only after finishing all this did he turn around and look at Su Wanqing. His eyes were very calm. No anger, no smugness, not even a ripple. Like looking at a stranger who had nothing to do with him. "Whether it was me, is that important?" he said. "It is important." Su Wanqing's lips were trembling. 32 billion. The life's work of 3 generations of the Desu family. "Huo Yunting, was it you?" Huo Yunting did not answer. He walked to the sofa, picked up a manila envelope, walked back to Su Wanqing and handed it to her. "Open it." Su Wanqing took the envelope. Her stiff fingers opened the seal. Inside was a document. The title was printed in bold black letters. Divorce Agreement. Her pupils constricted. She frantically flipped to the last page. Huo Yunting had already signed it. The date written was yesterday. "Sign it." Huo Yunting's voice was not loud, but carried an unquestionable pressure. "I don't want a single penny from the Su family. I only want one thing, full custody of Nian. Impossible." Su Wanqing blurted out. Her voice sharpened, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "Huo Yunting, Nian is my daughter too. You have no right to take her away from me." "Your daughter?" Huo Yunting's eyes finally showed a trace of change. The change was subtle, like an undercurrent surging beneath a calm lake surface, dangerous and icy. Su Wanqing, ask yourself, in Nian's 5 years, how many times have you made her formula? How many times have you taken her to the doctor? Where were you the night she had a 40-degree fever? Where were you on her first day of preschool when she cried for her mother? Su Wanqing stepped back under his words, her lips moving but no sound coming out. "I won't even hold those against you." Huo Yunting's voice sank deeper, as if squeezed from his chest. "But yesterday, your assistant, in front of your entire company's employees, forced my daughter to her knees and tried to make her kowtow. And you, Su Wanqing, what were you doing?" He took a step forward, looking down at her. "You just frowned," said "Have old Joe take her home," and turned and walked away. He paused. Nian cried the whole way home. When she got back, her dress was filthy, her arm was bruised, and her whole body was shaking. "And you didn't even call." Over at the dining table, Nian's head hung lower and lower. She didn't quite understand what the adults were saying, but she felt the tension and heaviness in the air. Her small hands clutched her milk glass tightly, her knuckles white. Su Wanqing's eyes reddened. She opened her mouth. The words came out with difficulty. I was in a meeting. I didn't know Gao Jun would." "You didn't know?" Huo Yunting cut her off. He let out a laugh. The smile was full of sarcasm. "What do you know? Do you know what Nian's favorite dish is? Do you know the name of her best friend? Do you know which bunny she has to hold when she sleeps at night?" Su Wanqing's tears finally fell. 3 years. I gave you 3 years. Huo Yunting watched her cry without a trace of pity on his face. "I thought that no matter how busy you were, you would eventually realize one day that you are her mother. But you didn't. You always put your company, your face, your pride before your daughter." He pushed the divorce agreement closer to her. "Sign it," he said. "After you sign, it'll leave you a last shred of dignity. I won't touch the Su Group's remaining assets." Su Wanqing looked up at him. Tears blurred her vision. Only now did she truly realize that the man standing before her was not the Huo Yunting she knew. What he held in his hand was not a spatula, but the fate of hundreds of people in the Su family. I won't sign it. She gritted her teeth. Her voice trembled but stubbornly refused to retreat. Huo Yunting stared at her for a few seconds. Then he suddenly took back the divorce agreement, turned, and walked back into the kitchen, picking up the spatula again. His voice was casual, as if speaking of a trivial matter. Fine, don't sign. Then Il changed the terms. Su Wanqing watched him nervously. Huo Yunting turned the stove back on, poured oil into the pan. It sizzled. He said, "Take your assistant, Gao Jun. Go apologize to my daughter in front of everyone. On your knees." Su Wanqing froze. Kneel. Her? The head of the Su family, the Iron Lady of Jiangzhu's business world, kneel in front of the entire company to a 5-year-old child. What? What did you say? She could barely believe her ears. You heard me clearly. Huo Yunting's voice floated from the kitchen, calm and cold. Gao Jun forced my daughter to kneel yesterday. Let him taste what it's like. As for you, he glanced sideways at her. What you owe Nian isn't a phone call or a box of toys. What you owe her is the respect you've never given her in these 5 years. I'll give you one day. Huo Yunting withdrew his gaze and placed the second fried egg onto a plate. By this time tomorrow, if Nian hasn't received your apology, I'll take it that you don't want the Su group anymore. When that happens, don't blame me for being ruthless. Su Wanqing stood rooted to the spot, chilled to the bone. At the dining table, Nian finally looked up. She cautiously glanced at her mother, then at her father, and softly asked, "Daddy, are you and Mommy fighting?" Huo Yunting carried the plate with the freshly fried egg over, crouched down, and stroked her hair with a gentle smile. "No, baby. Daddy and Mommy are just discussing things. Nian, be good. Finish your breakfast first. Daddy will take you to school in a bit." Su Wanqing stood in the entryway. She watched the warm scene between father and daughter, watched her daughter's evasive eyes toward her, watched her husband's back as he didn't even turn around. She discovered for the first time that in this house she was an outsider through and through. She turned, pushed open the door, and walked out. The cold morning breeze hit her face. Her tears dried and then welled up again. Her phone still had hundreds of unread messages, all bad news pouring in from the company. But only one thought occupied her mind right now. If she didn't kneel, the Su name would be gone tomorrow. And that man would mean every word he said. At 9:30 in the morning, Huo Yunting received a message from Li Feng. Just one line, "Everything is arranged." Huo Yunting glanced at it and deleted the message. He was sitting on the living room carpet, building blocks with Nian. It was Saturday. Nian had no school. She was curled up on the carpet in her little bear pajamas, intently placing a red roof piece onto a castle. "Daddy, where does this one go?" Nian held up a triangular block and looked up at him. On the very top, Huo Yunting pointed at the castle's tower. "That's the princess's room." Nian carefully placed the block on top. The castle was finally complete. She clapped her hands joyfully and threw herself into Huo Yunting's arms. "Daddy, look, I finished it." Huo Yunting hugged his daughter and kissed her forehead. Nian is amazing. Just then his phone vibrated. A text from Su Wanqing, a short line. 10 o'clock. Su Group Building Square. I will bring Gao Jun. Huo Yunting checked the time. 9:40. He put his phone away and looked down to ask Nian, how about Daddy takes you out for a bit? Where to? To a place. To see someone. Nian tilted her head thoughtfully, didn't ask further, and obediently nodded. She trusted her father. Wherever Daddy took her, she would go.
Huo Yunting dressed Nian in a yellow dress, tied her hair into 2 little braids with butterfly hair ties.
His movements were practiced and gentle. Thousands of days and nights of practice had made it muscle memory. Nian sat obediently, letting him comb her hair, occasionally yelping Daddy. "You're pulling my hair," and he would stop and carefully start again. Once she was ready, Huo Yunting took his daughter's hand and walked out the door. Outside the villa, a row of black Rolls-Royces was parked, 8 in total. 2 rows of men in black suits stood by the car doors. Each one was tall and stern-faced, their posture as straight as if cut by a blade. The lead man stepped forward, gave a slight bow, and said in a steady, respectful voice, "Sir, the car is ready." Nian curiously studied these people. She whispered, "Daddy, who are these uncles?" Huo Yunting smiled. "Daddy's friends. They're here to take us out to have fun." He did not say that these friends were a security team Li Feng had urgently deployed from overseas overnight. Each man was a retired Special Forces soldier with over a decade of combat experience. Nor did he say that Li Feng had already cleared the area around the Su Group building square of any suspicious persons and set up 3 security perimeters within a 2-kilometer radius. He simply carried his daughter into the middle Rolls-Royce Phantom, closed the door and shut out all outside eyes. The convoy slowly pulled out of the villa district and headed toward the city center. At the same time, the square in front of the Su Group building was already packed with people. Li Feng had done exactly as he said. At 6 in the morning, an anonymous email was sent to the editorial offices of all major media outlets in Jiangzhou City. The subject line was just one sentence: 10 a.m. Today, Su Group Square major news. The email did not specify what, but it attached a photo. The data chart of the Su Group's stock crash. That photo was enough to provoke everyone's curiosity. Thus, when Su Wanqing's Rolls-Royce arrived at the square, the sight she saw made her gasp. The square was teeming with people. Journalists from at least 30 media outlets had set up cameras and equipment. Even more bystanders were holding up their phones, live streaming. Who called the media? Su Wanqing's face drained of color. Her secretary in the passenger seat turned around and said cautiously, "President Su, it wasn't us, but the news has already spread. The whole internet is watching this." Su Wanqing turned to look out the window. The crowd in the square was growing. Some were adjusting cameras, some were speaking into their phone lenses, some were holding Su Group stock trend charts and doing live reports. Her heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand. This kneel. She would have to kneel live in front of the entire city's media. There was another person in the car huddled in the corner of the back seat, Gao Jun. The man who had been so arrogant in the Su Group hallway yesterday, forcing a 5-year-old girl to kneel, was now ashen-faced. Beads of sweat the size of soybeans rolled down his cheeks, his lips trembled. His hands were clenched so tight on his pants that his knuckles were white. President Su. Gao Jun's voice was about to cry. "Do I really have to go out there? With so many people? How can I ever show my face in Zhongzhou again?" Su Wanqing looked at him coldly. "When you forced my daughter to kneel yesterday, did you think about how she would face the world after this?" Her voice was icy. "Get out of the car." She was the first to push open the door and step out. In an instant, all the lenses swiveled toward her. The sound of shutters clicking was as dense as a rainstorm. Flashbulbs made the square blindingly white. Reporters frantically pushed forward. The security cordon strained and swayed. "President Su! President Su!"
What is the truth behind the Su Group stock crash?
"President Su. Rumors say the Su Group's partners are all terminating contracts. Is this true? President Su. What are you announcing with this public appearance today?" Su Wanqing did not answer any of them. She stood in the center of the crowd, pale-faced, but with her back ramrod straight. She wore a dark grey suit with light makeup, but it couldn't hide the red veins in her eyes and her haggard look. She raised a hand, signaling for silence. The clamor slowly died down. Just then, a low rumble of engines came from the other end of the square. Everyone turned their heads and saw a line of black Rolls-Royces slowly pulling into the square. The 8 cars fanned out. Their doors opened simultaneously. Over 20 men in black suits emerged, moving in perfect unison, and quickly cleared an open space in the center of the square. The door of the middle phantom opened. Huo Yunting stepped out. He was wearing an ordinary white button-down jeans and canvas shoes. In his arms was a little girl in a yellow dress, her hair in 2 braids. Her face held a mix of curiosity and nervousness. Nian Nian clung to her father's neck, eyeing the dense crowd and clicking cameras. She whispered, "Daddy, there are so many people. What are we doing here?" Huo Yunting gently patted her back. He leaned in and whispered something in her ear. Nian Nian blinked and nodded. Every lens, every eye focused on this man. Someone recognized him. Low gasps were heard. "Isn't that President Su's husband? The one? The stay-at-home dad? Why is he getting out of a Rolls-Royce? With so many bodyguards. Wait, what is going on?" Huo Yunting ignored all the murmuring. He carried his daughter to the center of the square and stopped less than 3 meters from Su Wanqing. He glanced at her. His gaze held no emotion, as if looking at an item in a shop window. Then he lowered his head and said to Nian 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 Nian, "Do you remember the man who forced you to kneel yesterday?" Nian Nian's body noticeably stiffened. She instinctively buried her face in Huo Yunting's shoulder and whispered, "I remember. It was that really mean, Uncle Gao. Don't be afraid." Huo Yunting's voice was light and soft, like a spring breeze. "Daddy is here. Today, let him apologize to you, okay?" Nian Nian didn't lift her head. She gave a tiny nod. Huo Yunting raised his eyes. His gaze swept past Su Wanqing and landed on the figure cowering in the car behind her. His eyes underwent a drastic change in that instant. The gentleness shattered like ice, revealing the bottomless dark water beneath. "Li Feng," he said. His voice was not loud, but clear enough for everyone present to hear. "Bring the man out." 2 men in black walked over, opened the car door, and dragged Gao Jun out like a chicken. Gao Jun's legs were as limp as noodles. He was hauled to the center of the square. He couldn't even kneel properly and collapsed onto the ground, trembling like a leaf. He raised his head to look at Huo Yunting. That face held no expression, but the eyes were like 2 knives stabbing straight into his bones. He never dared to lift his head again. The reporters in the square held their breath. Every camera was aimed at the man kneeling on the ground. Someone recognized him. Gao Jun, executive assistant to the president of the Su Group. Just yesterday, he had been strutting and speaking in a group meeting. Today, he was a pile of mud. Gao Jun knelt before a 5-year-old girl. His lips quivered for a long moment before he finally managed to make a sound. "Miss Huo. I'm sorry." His voice was hoarse and ugly, as if forced out from the back of his throat. "I was wrong yesterday. I shouldn't have yelled at you. I shouldn't have." He swallowed hard, his voice shaking violently. "I shouldn't have tried to force you to kneel. I deserve to die. I'm not human. He started slapping himself across the face. Slap. 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 One after another, heavy and loud. Each slap made his head jerk sideways. His face quickly became red and swollen. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, but he did not dare stop. I'm sorry. Miss Huo, please forgive me. I was blind. I'm lower than an animal." While slapping, he kowtowed. His forehead thudded against the stone floor of the square. Soon, his forehead was also bleeding. The entire square was utterly silent. Dozens of cameras quietly recorded it all. The hundreds of bystanders made no sound. Everyone watched as this man who once held a high position knelt on the ground, stripped of all dignity like a prisoner, begging a little girl for forgiveness. Nian Nian kept her face buried in Huo Yunting's shoulder, too afraid to look. Huo Yunting gently patted her back and whispered in her ear, "Nian Nian, take a look." "Just one look is enough." Nian Nian cautiously turned her head and peeked out with one eye. She saw the fierce Uncle Gao from yesterday, his face now covered in blood, kneeling on the ground, kowtowing and crying, begging for her forgiveness. She didn't understand what was happening, but she felt her father's embrace was warm and strong. She was no longer afraid. Huo Yunting waited for a minute, then raised his hand. Enough! The two men in black immediately hauled Gao Jun up. His face was unrecognizable, blood smeared at the corner of his mouth, a huge swollen lump on his forehead. He was like a man whose bones had been pulled out, slumped in the grip of the men in black, unable to even stand. Huo Yunting did not spare him another glance. His eyes shifted to Su Wanqing. "Your turn." 3 words, light as air, as if stating something of no consequence. Su Wanqing stood in place, her face as white as paper. She could feel everyone's eyes focused on her. The gazes held curiosity, schadenfreude, disbelief. Her knees felt like they were filled with lead, too heavy to lift. Her phone vibrated wildly in her pocket. It was the Su Group's shareholder group chat. Messages kept popping up. Some were asking what was happening. Some were cursing. Some were shouting at her to stabilize the situation. She reached in and turned her phone off. Then, step by step, Su Wanqing walked forward and stopped in front of Nian. She looked at her own daughter. This little girl she had failed for 5 years was nestled in Huo Yunting's arms, revealing only a pair of timid eyes, carefully studying her. In those eyes were strangeness, hesitation, and a tiny bit of expectation, cautiously hidden away. Su Wanqing's tears surged up. Her knees, finally, slowly, bit by bit, began to bend. The square fell so silent, it was as if someone had pressed the pause button on time. Hundreds of pairs of eyes stared fixedly in the same direction. Everyone unconsciously held their breath, as if a string in the air was stretched to its limit and would snap at the slightest force. Su Wanqing knelt on the cold stone floor. The moment her knees touched the ground, several suppressed gasps rose from the crowd. Someone inhaled sharply. Someone clapped a hand over their mouth. The hand of someone holding up a phone trembled. No one present could believe their eyes. The woman kneeling on the ground was Su Wanqing, the Su Wanqing who had never cracked a public smile in 3 years. The Su Wanqing who had graced the cover of Forbes. The Su Wanqing that the entire Zhengzhou business world called the Iron Lady. And now she was kneeling before a 5-year-old girl. Su Wanqing kept her head down, her gaze on her own knees. The chill of the stone floor seeped through the thin fabric of her skirt, piercingly cold. She could feel everyone's stares pricking her back like needles. Her neck was stiff, her face burning. Her chest felt like it was packed with scorching sand, each breath grinding painfully. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. It wasn't that she didn't want to speak. It was as if something was tightly lodged in her throat. No matter how hard she tried, she could not utter a single syllable. Her vision blurred. The stone floor beneath her knees became a grey blur through her tears. Nian. She finally made a sound. The voice was hoarse and trembling, squeezed out bit by bit from the deepest part of her chest. Every word seemed stained with blood. Mommy was wrong. She had rehearsed these 4 words in her mind the entire night. But when they actually left her mouth, Su Wanqing found they were as light as a feather. They couldn't possibly carry the weight of the debt she owed over 5 years. What she owed Nian was so much more than an apology. In Huo Yunting's arms, Nian stirred. The little girl secretly turned her head and looked at her mother kneeling on the ground. She was too young to fully grasp what this scene meant, but she saw her mother crying. Her little brows furrowed. Confusion and unease appeared on her small face. She tilted her head up and gently tugged at Huo Yunting's collar. She whispered, "Daddy." "Mommy is crying." Huo Yunting lowered his head and kissed his daughter's forehead. He said nothing. His hand steadily supported Nian's back. He did not rush her, nor did he stop her. He just stood there quietly, like a bystander, waiting for Su Wanqing to finish saying what needed to be said. Su Wanqing's tears finally burst forth completely. Large teardrops rolled from her eyes and splashed onto the stone floor, spreading into small dark blooms. She could not control her trembling shoulders. Everything she had forcibly suppressed over 5 years, exhaustion, guilt, loneliness, and the unspoken care for her daughter, now crashed through the dam she had so carefully built like a flood. "Mommy is sorry." Her voice was broken, like shattered porcelain that couldn't be put back together. 5 years. Mommy never properly spent a single day with you. When you were sick, Mommy was on business trips. When it was your birthday, Mommy was in meetings. On your first day of preschool, when you cried for Mommy, I was dining with clients. She raised her head and looked at her daughter through her tear-blurred eyes. That little face, the features so much like her own, yet the eyes looking back at her was so unfamiliar. Yesterday. She choked, her voice trembling even harder. Yesterday, when someone bullied you, Mommy was right there. Mommy saw it, but Mommy didn't do anything. Mommy just thought about being late for the meeting. Just thought it was a trivial matter, not worth stopping for. She couldn't continue. She bent forward, her forehead nearly touching the ground, her whole body curled up. She knelt there, not in a dignified way with her back straight, but as if all her bones had been pulled out. Her hair fell loose, covering her face. Her shoulders shook violently. She cried without any image, without any dignity. "Nian, Nian, Mommy begs you. Please forgive Mommy." Her voice was so hoarse, it was unrecognizable, mixed with sobs, forced out of her throat as if using the last ounce of her strength. In the square, some people turned their faces away, unable to watch any longer. Several young female journalists' eyes reddened. They were used to chasing hot stories and getting exclusives. But now they silently lowered their cameras, and it wasn't just them. More and more people put down their phones. No one was live streaming anymore. This was not news. This was a mother, before her own daughter, stripping herself bare, laying out all her hidden mistakes and regrets, one by one, under the sunlight. Nian Nian looked at her mother kneeling on the ground, crying and shaking uncontrollably. The expression on her little face shifted from confusion to sadness, and then from sadness to worry. She couldn't understand every word her mother said, but she understood her mother's tears. Her small hand clutched Huo Yunting's collar tightly. Her voice was anxious. "Daddy, can you ask Mommy to get up? The ground is cold." Huo Yunting still didn't speak. His gaze rested on Su Wanqing. His eyes were deep and complicated. He had been this woman's husband for 3 years. He had seen her proud. He had seen her cold. He had seen her commanding and arrogant in the boardroom. But he had never seen her like this, like a person emptied of everything, kneeling in the dust, crying like a lost child. He waited a moment, then, holding Nian Nian, walked 2 steps forward and stopped in front of Su Wanqing. "Nian Nian," he said to his daughter, his voice gentle and calm. "Would you like to say something to Mommy?" Nian Nian hesitated. She looked at her father, then at her mother kneeling on the ground. She pressed her little lips together, thinking for a long time. Then she stretched out a small hand toward Su Wanqing. The hand was tiny, the fingers white and soft. The nails had been trimmed by Huo Yunting just last night, round and clean. "Mommy, don't cry." Nian's voice was sweet and soft like a freshly picked cotton candy. "Nian, Nian. Nian, Nian isn't mad at you anymore." These words were like a pebble thrown onto a frozen lake, cracking through the ice, sending water splashing everywhere. Su Wanqing abruptly looked up. She grabbed her daughter's little hand like a drowning person clutching at a piece of driftwood. She pressed her daughter's small hand against her own face. Her scalding tears ran over Nian Nian's fingers. She cried so hard her whole body convulsed. She kept saying over and over, "Thank you. Thank you, Nian Nian. Mommy will definitely spend time with you from now on. Mommy will never leave you behind again." Nian Nian was a little bewildered by her mother's tears, but she did not pull her hand back. She looked down at Su Wanqing and suddenly seemed to remember something. In a milky voice, she said, "Mommy, don't fight with Daddy anymore, okay? The teacher says daddies and mommies need to love each other so that little kids will be happy." The square fell silent once more. Su Wanqing's body stiffened. Then, little by little, she turned toward Huo Yunting and raised her head. Her face was covered in tear stains. Strands of hair were plastered to her cheeks by tears. Her lip bore deep teeth marks from where she had bitten it. She knelt there like that, looking up at the man she had despised for 3 years. Her lips trembled several times before she finally managed to speak. "Huo Yunting. I'm sorry. It's me. I wasn't worthy." Her voice was so low it was almost inaudible. But everyone heard it. This sorry spoken to Huo Yunting was even harder than all the words she had just said to her daughter, because it meant she had to chew up and swallow 3 years of her own arrogance and prejudice, and then, in front of the whole world, admit she was wrong. Huo Yunting looked down at her. He did not speak for a long time. A gust of wind swept through the square, lifting Su Wanqing's disheveled hair. She knelt there, like a statue eroded by wind and rain, with not a trace of the Iron Lady left in her. Finally, Huo Yunting spoke. "You can get up now." His voice was neither cold nor warm. No mockery, no pity. He spoke as if stating a concluded matter, his tone calm and detached. "I don't need your apology. What Nian Nian needs is a real mother. Not a CEO who puts the whole world ahead of her." He paused. "You knelt here today not for me. It was for Nian Nian. If you truly feel you owe her, then spend the rest of your days making it up to her. As for your company..." He glanced down at Su Wanqing. His eyes finally held a sliver of warmth, though only a little. "The Su Group, I won't touch it anymore. You clean up the rest of the mess yourself." After he finished, he turned and left, carrying Nian Nian. Nian Nian, draped over Huo Yunting's shoulder, waved her little hand at Su Wanqing, who was still kneeling on the ground. A smile blossomed on her small face. "Mommy, bye-bye!" That smile was clean and bright, like a ray of sunshine breaking through layers of dark clouds. It was the first time in Nian Nian's 5 years that she had said bye-bye to her mother without crying. Su Wanqing remained kneeling, watching the man's back grow more distant. He walked calmly and steadily, his pace neither fast nor slow, exactly the same as every morning for the past 3 years when he took Nian Nian to school. But the bodyguards in black behind him, the row of black Rolls-Royces, and the crowd in the square watching him leave, all silently spoke a single truth. This man had never been who she thought he was. Su Wanqing slowly propped herself up from the ground. Her knees ached fiercely, and her legs were weak. She steadied herself on a nearby assistant just to stand. Some reporters tentatively approached to interview her, but she waved them off. She wiped the tears from her face, took a deep breath, and looked up at the massive sign atop the Su Group building. 32 billion was gone. Most of her partners had fled. The Su Group was gravely wounded, knocked from the top tier of Zhengzhou City to the second tier, maybe even lower. Her empire, her pride, everything she had painstakingly built over 3 years had been knocked back to square one overnight. Yet, strangely, her heart felt a little lighter. Like a giant rock that had pressed on her chest for years, had finally been pried off by a pair of rough, powerful hands. She took out her phone and turned it on. A flood of messages poured in. The shareholder group chat had exploded with people scolding her, comforting her, making snide remarks. She quickly scanned it, then closed the chat and dialed a number. "Notify all senior executives. Meeting in 1 hour. We have a mess to clean up." Her voice had regained its composure, but the sharp, icy edge from before was gone. The secretary on the other end was briefly stunned, then hurriedly agreed. Su Wanqing hung up and took one last look at the figure growing smaller and smaller at the edge of the square. Huo Yunting was already getting into the car with Nian Nian. Before the door closed, Nian Nian was still waving in her direction. Su Wanqing curved the corners of her mouth. For the first time, facing her daughter's retreating back, she managed a somewhat clumsy, awkward smile. The car started and slowly drove out of the square. Sunlight poured over the high-rises of Zhengzhou City. The glass curtain walls reflected dazzling light. The city was as busy and bustling as it was yesterday. The Su Group's stock price would still fluctuate tomorrow. Partners still needed to be won back one by one. A new business landscape still needed to be drawn. But some things in that moment just now had become irrevocably different. After the storm at the Su Group gradually subsided, Huo Yunting's life returned to its original rhythm. He woke up at 7 every morning, made breakfast for Nian Nian, carefully tied her hair into braids, and then took her to preschool. At 4 in the afternoon he appeared punctually at the preschool gate, brought her home and did crafts with her, watched cartoons, ate dinner, gave her a bath and told bedtime stories. The days flowed by like a quiet, clear river. About 2 weeks passed like this. That afternoon, Huo Yunting went to pick up Nian Nian from preschool as usual. He parked the car and walked to the gate, only to find that the person coming out to greet him was not Nian Nian but her teacher, Miss Fang Min. Miss Fang was a young woman in her early 20s with a round face and black-rimmed glasses. She was always smiling, but today her expression was a bit troubled. She stood at the gate, holding Nian Nian's hand, looking around anxiously. When she saw Huo Yunting approaching, she visibly sighed with relief. "Mr. Huo, you're here." Fang Min quickly stepped forward and lowered her voice. "Today, there was a little incident." Huo Yunting glanced down at his daughter. Nian Nian was hiding behind Fang Min, her 2 little hands twisting the hem of her dress. Her head was hung very low, refusing to look up at him. Her small cheeks were puffed out, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes were still a little red, as if she had been crying but was stubbornly holding it in. Huo Yunting crouched down and gently lifted his daughter's chin with his hand. "Nian Nian, tell Daddy what happened." Nian Nian stubbornly turned her face away and said nothing. Fang Min sighed softly from the side and explained in a low voice, "Here is what happened. During free play this afternoon, a little boy in the class, Liu Zixuan, got into an argument with Nian Nian. Liu Zixuan said Nian Nian was a wild child with no mother, and he also said her mother didn't want her anymore." Huo Yunting's eyes darkened, but he didn't speak, just continued listening. Nian Nian was very angry. She argued back for a bit. Liu Zixuan then said some other unpleasant things and then... Fang Min paused here, her face showing an expression that was between wanting to laugh and wanting to sigh. Then Nian Nian pushed him. Liu Zixuan lost his balance, fell on his bottom and scraped his knee a little. He cried quite loudly. Huo Yunting looked down at his daughter. Nian Nian's head hung even lower. Her little hands had twisted her dress hem into a knot. She looked like a little quail awaiting punishment. "Nian Nian." Huo Yunting's voice was very soft, without a trace of reproach. "Look up. Look at Daddy." Nian Nian hesitated for several seconds. Finally, bit by bit, she lifted her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but there was no fear in them, only a tightly wound stubbornness. Her little mouth was a firm line. Her chin was tilted up slightly. Her expression clearly said, "I know I did something wrong, but I don't regret it." "You pushed him?" Huo Yunting asked. Nian Nian gave a firm nod. "Because he said you don't have a mother." Nian Nian's eyes instantly reddened again, but she fought hard to hold back the tears. Her little voice was small, yet charged with anger and hurt she couldn't suppress. "What he said was wrong. I do have a mummy." "I do. My mummy is just busy." Huo Yunting looked at his daughter, so stubborn and wronged. His heart felt like it was being cut with a dull knife. He didn't scold her. He didn't start lecturing. He just pulled Nian into his arms and held her for a moment. Then he let go, cupped her little face, and looked seriously into her eyes. Nian, listen carefully. His voice was not loud, but every word was steady. You did the right thing. Nian was stunned. Fang Min was also stunned. Mr. Whoa! Fang Min started to say something, looking anxious, but Huo Yunting raised a hand at her, signaling for her to let him finish. Nian, he continued, looking at his daughter with a gaze that was gentle yet firm. That boy said you don't have a mother. He was bullying you. When someone bullies you, you have the right to defend yourself. You pushed him today. You were right to push him. But Nian mumbled quietly. The teacher said, hitting is wrong. Hitting is wrong. Huo Yunting nodded. So Daddy is going to tell you when you can hit. When someone bullies you, mocks you, hurts you. At that moment, first tell him loudly. Don't you say that? If he still won't listen and keeps bullying you, then you hit back with all your might. Hit him until he doesn't dare bully you anymore. Nian's eyes went wide, clearly shocked by this lesson, which was completely opposite to her teacher's. Fang Min was listening at the side, dumbstruck. Her face looked like she wanted to say something, but had no idea where to start. Huo Yunting stood up and looked Fang Min in the eye. His tone was polite, but brooked no argument. Miss Fang, I'm very sorry for the trouble caused to the school. I will cover Liu Zixuan's medical expenses, and I will apologize to his parents in person. But his gaze suddenly became very serious, so serious that Fang Min unconsciously took half a step back. My rule for raising my daughter is simple. She is not allowed to bully others, but she absolutely cannot be bullied by others. She pushed someone today. That's my failure as a father to teach her properly. I take responsibility. But if next time someone says to her face that she has no mother, she will push again, and next time I will tell her to push harder. Fang Min opened her mouth, wanting to say something. In the end, she just sighed and shook her head with a wry smile. Mr. Whoa, your parenting style! It's really quite unique. Huo Yunting smiled faintly. The smile was mild and harmless, starkly different from the man who had just said, push harder. My daughter doesn't need to be a perfect, obedient child. She just needs to be a child who is not bullied. He looked down and took Nian's hand. Say goodbye to Miss Fang. Nian obediently waved at her teacher. Bye-bye, Miss Fang. As father and daughter walked out the preschool gate, Nian suddenly tugged on Huo Yunting's hand and whispered, Daddy, next time, if he says I don't have a mummy again, can I push him twice? Huo Yunting looked down at his daughter's serious little face asking this question and couldn't help the corners of his mouth lifting. He crouched down and pinched her little nose. Once is enough. But you have to remember, after you push him, come find Daddy right away. No matter what happens, Daddy will always be on your side. Nian nodded her head firmly. The hurt on her little face finally mostly disappeared, replaced by a sweet smile. She stuck out her pinky and said in her milky voice, Pinky, promise. Pinky promise? Huo Yunting hooked his own pinky around his daughter's tiny finger. The setting sun stretched the shadows of father and daughter very long. Nian skipped ahead, humming a song she had learned from a cartoon. Huo Yunting followed behind her, watching her ponytail bounce on her shoulder. The tenderness in his eyes was like thick, indelible ink. What Nian needed, he thought, was not reasoning. She needed a sense of security. She wasn't lacking a teacher to lecture her about right and wrong. What she lacked was a father who would stand behind her no matter what. And he was that person. Huo Yunting had thought the matter would end there. A scuffle between children, a push, a scraped knee. He would pay the medical bills and apologize. That would be the end of it. But he underestimated the other parents' fighting spirit. The next afternoon, just after he brought Nian home and they were sitting on the carpet building Legos, the doorbell suddenly rang violently. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. It wasn't a single press. It was pressed repeatedly, urgent and bouts out irritable, like someone was banging on the door with their fist. Huo Yunting frowned. He settled Nian on the sofa and went to open the door. As soon as the door opened, a thick wave of perfume hit him. Standing at the door was a family of 3, a woman with big wavy hair, covered head to toe in designer logos, a man with a beer belly and a face full of surly flesh, and a chubby little boy. It was none other than Liu Zixuan, whom Nian had pushed yesterday. A band-aid was stuck to the little fatty's knee, and a smug grin was on his face. Clearly his parents had brought him to demand justice. "You're Huo Nianen's father." The big-haired woman didn't wait for Huo Yunting to speak. She immediately jabbed a finger at his nose. Her voice was so loud the entire street could hear. "Your daughter pushed my son down. Look at his knee, it's all scraped up. What are you going to do about it?" Huo Yunting leaned against the doorframe, arms folded across his chest. His expression was bland. "I already spoke with the school yesterday. I will cover the medical expenses. Tell me how much." "Medical expenses," the woman sneered, as if she'd just heard the world's funniest joke. "You think throwing money at it makes it all better? My son was physically struck by your ill-mannered brat. This is assault. Our Zixuan has been pampered since the day he was born and has never suffered such a grievance. Do you have any idea the psychological trauma this has caused him?" The beer-bellied man beside her also stepped forward, looming over Huo Yunting. He was half a head shorter, but his aura was aggressive. His gold chain glinted painfully under the sunlight. "Let me tell you, this isn't over," the man growled, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Call your wife out here. I want to ask Su Wanqing how she's raising her child." "Oh, right," he deliberately drawled, a mocking smile spreading across his face. "I heard Shay's about to divorce you." "Figures. A woman who can't even respect her own husband, what kind of daughter could she possibly raise?" Huo Yunting's eyes changed in that instant. They had been lazy and casual, just a moment before, as if watching 2 clowns perform. But the moment the name Su Wanqing left the man's mouth, the temperature in Huo Yunting's eyes plummeted. It was as if an ice cave had been drilled deep into his pupils. He was still leaning against the doorframe. His posture didn't change, his expression didn't change, but the air around him suddenly became very thin. The couple instinctively felt something shift. The man's laughter cut off abruptly. The woman also took a half step back, unconsciously. "What did you just say?" Huo Yunting's voice was very soft, soft as a feather falling on snow. "Say it again." The beer-bellied man felt a chill under that stare. But in front of his wife and child, he could not lose face. He steeled himself and shot back. "I said, your wife." Slap. A crisp, clean slap, fast as a flash of lightning. The man's head snapped to the side. He stumbled 2 steps and fell heavily on his rear. A bright red handprint instantly swelled on his left cheek. Blood seeped from the corner of his mouth. He clutched his face, staring up at Huo Yunting in utter disbelief. You dare hit me?" His voice was shaking. "Hit you?" Huo Yunting looked down at him, his face expressionless. "That was just a small lesson for running your mouth in front of my daughter's home. If you say one more word..." He suddenly lifted his foot and placed it on the man's right knee. It wasn't a stomp, just a light placement, as if testing a stone underfoot. But the beer-bellied man screamed in agony, his whole face contorting. He felt that foot pressing on his knee like a mountain. His joint made grinding, cracking sounds on the verge of shattering. "Ah! Let go! Let me go!" The man struggled desperately, but Huo Yunting's foot was as steady as if welded to his leg. The big-haired woman let out a shriek and lunged forward to claw at Huo Yunting. Huo Yunting didn't even look at her. He lifted a hand and seized her wrist. The force was not great, but it precisely locked the joint. The woman turned white from pain, her body doubling over like a shrimp. Her scream turned into whimpering moans. "And you?" Huo Yunting turned his gaze to her face. "Control your mouth." control your son. Your son told my daughter to her face yesterday that she has no mother. You two go home and reflect on that properly." He released his grip. The woman immediately recoiled as if electrocuted, scrambling backward out the gate. Huo Yunting withdrew his foot and stepped back, once again standing within the doorframe. He adjusted his collar, his movement unhurried and elegant, as if nothing had just happened. Now, his voice had returned to calm, even carrying a hint of polite smile. "You may leave. If you feel unsatisfied, come find me any time.
My name is Huo Yunting.
I live right here. I won't be moving." The beer-bellied man struggled up from the ground. His face cycled through shades of green and white. His lips trembled for a long moment, but ultimately he dared not say another word. Dragging his still sobbing wife and his petrified son, he stumbled back to the BMW parked at the curb. Huo Yunting stood at the doorway watching the BMW scurry away in disgrace. Then he closed the door and walked back to the living room. Nian was still on the sofa, a Lego block in her hand, her eyes wide as saucers, clearly frightened by the scene at the door just now. "Daddy, did you fight with that uncle?" she asked softly. Huo Yunting walked over and sat beside her. He took the Lego block from her hand and helped her press it onto the castle roof. He smiled, his tone as casual as discussing what to have for dinner. "No fighting. Daddy just reasoned with them." Nian tilted her head, thought for a moment, then seriously shook her head. "But I saw that uncle sitting on the ground. That's because he couldn't stand steady," Huo Yunting said without batting an eye. Nian gave a dubious "oh" and lowered her head back to her Legos. After placing 2 more blocks, she suddenly looked up. Her eyes were sparkling as she looked at Huo Yunting. "Daddy, are you super strong?" Huo Yunting ruffled her hair, messing up her little braids. "I do all right. Strong enough to protect Nian." Nian giggled and threw herself into his arms, burying her face in her father's chest. She mumbled, "Then I'm gonna become super strong too, so I can protect myself with Daddy." Huo Yunting held his daughter, his chin resting on top of her head. The corner of his mouth slowly lifted. Outside the window, sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting warm stripes on the carpet. The Lego castle stood crookedly on the coffee table, like a tiny fortress that had just weathered a storm but still stood tall. As for the man who had fled in such a sorry state, he probably would not dare set foot on this street again for a very long time. The days went by. Under Su Wanqing's management, the Su Group slowly began to recover. Though it was no longer at its former glory, it had at least preserved its foundation and avoided total collapse. Su Wanqing sent Huo Yunting messages every day, asking about Nian. Sometimes Huo Yunting replied with a few words. Sometimes he didn't reply at all. He wasn't making things difficult for her. He wasn't seeking revenge. He just felt that a true mother's concern for her daughter should not be reduced to a few lines on a phone screen. That day was a Saturday. The weather was exceptionally fine. It was a crisp autumn day. The sky was as blue as if it had been washed clean, without a single cloud in sight. Huo Yunting decided to take Nian to an amusement park. Not just any amusement park, it was the most famous one in Jiangzhou City, starry fairy tale paradise, spanning over 200 acres, boasting the largest indoor fairy tale castle in Asia and the tallest Ferris wheel. Tickets for a weekend normally required booking a month in advance. The line to enter would wrap 3 times around the square. But Huo Yunting did not need to line up. He made a call to Li Feng. 20 minutes later, the park's general manager called him personally. His tone was as deferential as a subordinate reporting to a superior. "Mr. Whoa, everything is arranged. The park is closed to the public today and will be open exclusively for Miss Nian." Huo Yunting gave a flat word of thanks and hung up. He didn't tell Nian any of this. He simply dressed his daughter, tied her hair, and drove her out the door just like any other day. Nian sat in her child seat in the back, swinging her legs and chattering non-stop about the funny things that happened in preschool. She didn't notice at all that Daddy hadn't taken the usual route to preschool today. When they arrived at the park entrance, Nian froze for 2 seconds, then let out a scream. Starry fairy tale paradise. She was so excited, she nearly bounced out of her car seat. Daddy, Daddy, are we going to the amusement park?
Really?
For real? Huo Yunting parked the car and turned back with a smile. Really? But... Nian suddenly remembered something. Half the excitement on her little face faded. Zhao Mei in my class said tickets here are super hard to get. You have to book way in advance, and the lines are so long. If we don't have tickets, will we not get in? Huo Yunting unbuckled his seatbelt, got out, went around to the back seat, lifted his daughter out, set her on the ground and took her hand. Let's just try. Maybe Nian is extra lucky today. Nian followed her father toward the entrance, half doubting. The gate was wide open. There were no crowds in line, no packed passageways. Just 2 rows of uniformed staff who bowed in perfect unison and said in one voice, "Welcome, Mr. Huo and Miss Nian." The park's general manager personally came forward. He half-crouched to Nian's eye level and said with a beaming smile, "Miss Nian, welcome to Starry Fairy Tale Paradise. All the rides today are open just for you. You can play whatever you like, as many times as you like." Nian's little mouth formed a perfect round O. It took a while to close. She turned her head to look at Huo Yunting. Her eyes were filled with shock and ecstasy. "Daddy, am I a princess?" Huo Yunting burst out laughing at her question. "You've always been Daddy's princess." Nian let out a cheer and dashed into the park on her tiny feet. Huo Yunting put his hands in his pockets and strolled leisurely behind her, watching her spin and jump and giggle like a little bird let out of its cage in the completely empty park square. For an entire day, Nian played like crazy. She rode the merry-go-round 6 times. Each time, she had to ride a different horse, trying out every single painted pony until she finally settled on her favorite, the pink unicorn. She sat atop it, hugging its neck with both arms, laughing like a little blooming flower. She drove the bumper cars 3 times. Huo Yunting squeezed into the tiny car, his long legs cramped, his knees nearly hitting the steering wheel. Nian sat beside him, gripping the wheel and shouting, "Daddy, hit that one, quick!" Father and daughter spun around the empty arena, their laughter echoing off the walls. The Ferris wheel rose to its highest point. Nian pressed herself against the glass, looking down at the entire city of Zhangzhou. The buildings became the size of toy blocks. The cars on the roads became tiny moving black dots. The river in the distance shimmered under the sun. Nian gasped in wonder and turned back to Huo Yunting. "Daddy, from up here, the world looks so small." Huo Yunting sat beside her, looking out the window at the city, and said quietly, "Yeah. Some things, when you look at them from a different angle, don't seem so important anymore." Nian didn't understand this grown-up sentiment. She had already turned her head to watch a flock of white doves flying by in the distance. As evening approached, father and daughter sat on a bench in the park's central square to rest. Nian held a stick of cotton candy bigger than her face. She ate it messily, pink sugar strands all over her mouth, a shiny layer of sugar glaze on her cheeks. Huo Yunting used a napkin to wipe her mouth. She obediently tilted her face up for him to clean, her eyes curving into 2 crescent moons. The setting sun coated the entire park in a warm golden light. The fairy tale castle in the distance lit up in the twilight, twinkling like stars had landed on its spires. The sweet scent of popcorn drifted in the air. The faint music of the merry-go-round could still be heard. Nian leaned against Huo Yunting and let out a satisfied sigh. "Daddy, this is the happiest day ever." Huo Yunting wrapped his arm around his daughter, the corner of his mouth lifting. "There will be even happier ones. Just then, his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, Su Wanqing. Huo Yunting hesitated a moment, then answered. He didn't speak. He just waited quietly. Su Wanqing's voice came through. It was hoarse and tired, as if she had just been crying. Huo Yunting, I want to see Nian, just for a little while. Is that okay? Huo Yunting held the phone, silent for a few seconds. He looked down at his daughter in his arms. Nian was intently licking her cotton candy. A smear of white sugar was stuck on the tip of her nose, making her look like a kitten that had sneaked some milk powder. We're at starry fairy tale paradise. After saying this, he didn't wait for Su Wanqing to respond before hanging up. Nian looked up at him, blinking. Daddy, who was that? Huo Yunting wiped the sugar off her nose and smiled. It was Mommy. She said she wants to come see you. Nian's movement stopped. She lowered her head and looked at the melting cotton candy in her hand. After a long moment, she gave a soft "oh." Huo Yunting gazed at the lit-up castle spires in the distance. He thought to himself, Su Wanqing, last time you knelt before Nian was a beginning. But whether that beginning was enough, that depends on you. By the time Su Wanqing rushed to starry fairy tale paradise, it was almost dark. She drove herself. A silver-grey Porsche stopped at the park entrance. Compared to her usual business motorcades, it was almost shabby. No driver, no assistant, no secretary. Just a woman with a heart full of unease. She got out of the car. Her high heels clicked on the stone pavement. She wasn't wearing a business suit today. She had changed into a soft beige knit top and dark trousers. Her hair was simply tied in a low ponytail. This outfit made her look several years younger and stripped away much of her usual sharpness. In her hands were 3 bulging shopping bags, each emblazoned with different designer logos. In one bag was the limited edition Barbie Dream Castle set. Nian had seen it countless times in TV commercials, her face practically glued to the screen every time. In another bag were imported handmade chocolates, strawberry-filled cookies and marshmallows, all flavors Nian loved. In the third bag was a pink little dress. Su Wanqing had spent 2 hours in the department store picking it out. The skirt was embroidered with Nian's favorite little bunny pattern. The total cost of these items was enough for an ordinary person's monthly salary.
Yet, Su Wanqing carried them without a shred of confidence.
She walked through the park entrance and spotted the father and daughter from a distance. By the central fountain in the park square, Nian was sitting on a bench. Her 2 little legs dangled in the air, swinging back and forth. She held a nearly finished cotton candy in her hand. Huo Yunting sat beside her, using a wet wipe to clean her hands. They were chatting about something. Nian giggled brightly. Her laughter drifted far across the empty square. Su Wanqing's steps unconsciously slowed. She watched this scene, and her heart felt like an overturned bottle of mixed flavors. The sourness was all the sunsets like this she had missed. The sweetness was her daughter laughing so happily. The bitterness was that this laughter had nothing to do with her. She took a deep breath and walked over. Nian. She stopped a few steps away and called out cautiously. Nian's laughter stopped. She turned her head and saw Su Wanqing. The smile on her face receded like a tide pulling back. She did not jump off the bench and run over. She did not call out Mommy. She just sat there quietly, her little hands resting on her knees. Her eyes held a distance and reserve that did not belong to a 5-year-old.
Huo Yunting noticed his daughter's change, but he said nothing.
He just tossed the wet wipe into a nearby trash can, leaned back against the bench, and watched silently. Su Wanqing's heart sank. But she did not retreat. She walked to the bench and crouched down to Nian's eye level. She tried hard to make her voice sound cheerful. Nian, Mommy brought you some presents. Do you want to see? She placed the shopping bags on the bench one by one. The first bag opened. The Barbie castle's packaging gleamed in the sunset. Nian's eyes lit up momentarily. That kind of spark was impossible to hide. It was the most instinctive reaction of a child seeing a long-coveted toy. But the light lasted only a second before she carefully tucked it away. She lowered her head and said softly, "Thank you, Mommy." 3 words: polite, courteous, distant. Su Wanqing's hand froze in mid-air. Her daughter was thanking her in a tone she would use with a stranger who gave her a gift. She fought back the sting in her eyes and opened the second bag. Then the third. The handmade chocolates, the strawberry cookies, the pink bunny dress, all laid out before Nian Nian. Each item had been carefully chosen. Each was expensive. With each item, Nian Nian gave a soft thank you. The voice was sweet and soft, like a puff of cotton candy. But to Su Wanqing's ears, those repeated thank yous were sharper than knives. This was exactly how Nian Nian talked to the old man selling balloons at the preschool gate. Su Wanqing's tears finally broke free. She did not want to cry in front of her daughter. But the tears would not obey. They rolled from her eyes one after another, falling onto the expensive fabric of her pants. Nian Nian, her voice trembled with suppressed sobs. Mommy knows she was wrong. Could you please say a few more words to Mommy? You can scold Mommy, you can hit Mommy. Just please don't be so quiet. Nian Nian looked up at Su Wanqing's tear-streaked face. Her little brows furrowed. Her lips moved, as if she wanted to say something but didn't know what to say. She turned to Huo Yunting, her eyes pleading for help. Huo Yunting straightened up from the bench. His gaze settled calmly on Su Wanqing. His voice was not loud, but every word was clear. Now you know how it hurts. Su Wanqing covered her face. Her shoulders shook with sobs. She could not speak through her tears. For 5 years, how many times did Nian Nian want to talk to you, and you told her Mommy is busy? How many times did she want you to hold her, and you got into your car without looking back? She couldn't find you when she cried. She couldn't find you when she laughed. And now you think a Barbie doll can wipe away 5 years of debt in one stroke. He paused. His tone was flat, yet exceptionally piercing. Do you think that's possible? Su Wanqing shook her head as she wept. She repeated brokenly, I know it's not enough. I know it's not enough. Huo Yunting was silent for a moment. He looked at this woman crying without any image, then looked down at the little girl in his arms who was pressing her lips together, her eyes full of unease. He sighed. All right, stop crying. His tone softened a little, no longer the knife-edge cold from before. Nian is watching you. If you truly want to make amends, don't cry here. Do something real. Su Wanqing desperately held back her tears. She wiped her face roughly with her sleeve and raised her head to look at Huo Yunting. Her eyes were as red as a rabbit's. Tell me what to do. I'll do anything. Huo Yunting met her gaze for 3 seconds. There was no mockery in his eyes. No cruelty. Just a calm, serious scrutiny, as if judging how much of her words were truly sincere. Starting tomorrow, you will personally take Nian Nian to school and pick her up. Su Wanqing froze. No driver. No assistant. Personally. This meant getting up 2 hours earlier every morning. Pushing aside all evening's social obligations, turning business dinners into conference calls, moving board meetings to the afternoon. Every day, Huo Yunting repeated, enunciating heavily. Not once a week, not when you have free time. Every day, drop off in the morning, pick up in the evening. Can you do that? Su Wanqing did not hesitate. She looked at Huo Yunting with her swollen red eyes. Her voice still carried the rasp of tears, but it was unusually resolute. I can. Promising is easy. Huo Yunting leaned back against the bench, his tone returning to that lazy calm. Whether you can follow through, we'll see from your actions. I won't stop you, but I won't put in a good word for you either. Whether Nian Nian is willing to accept you again is up to you. After he finished, he stood up and lifted Nian Nian from the bench. It's getting late. Nian Nian needs to go back and take a bath. Nian Nian lay over Huo Yunting's shoulder and looked at Su Wanqing, who was still crouched on the ground, wiping her tears. The street lamps had come on. The warm yellow light fell on Su Wanqing's face, making her tear tracks glisten. Nian Nian suddenly spoke up in a small voice. "Mommy, don't cry. Tomorrow. Tomorrow when you come to pick me up, I won't hide anymore." Su Wanqing's whole body jolted. She abruptly looked up at her daughter's bright, shining eyes. Her tears welled up again, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from something fiercely knocking against her heart. She nodded vigorously. Her voice was hoarse beyond recognition. Okay. Mommy will definitely come tomorrow." Huo Yunting said nothing. Holding Nian Nian, he turned and walked toward the parking lot. Nian Nian, draped over her father's shoulder, waved her little hand in Su Wanqing's direction. The nearly finished cotton candy in her hand looked like a tiny, glowing cloud in the night. Su Wanqing remained crouched, watching the backs of father and daughter slowly disappear into the twilight. She wiped away her tears, stood up, and put the expensive gifts back into the bags one by one. Then she took out her phone and dialed her secretary's number. "Cancel all my appointments for tomorrow morning. Actually, not just tomorrow. Starting tomorrow, every morning from 7 to 9, every afternoon from 3:30 to 6, block out that time. Don't schedule anything." The secretary was so shocked she couldn't speak for a moment. "President Su, you have a very important..." I said, "Cancel it." Su Wanqing's voice had returned to its usual composure, but her tone carried an unprecedented certainty. "Whatever it is, push it back. From now on, those 2 time slots every day are reserved for only one person." She hung up the phone and tilted her head back to look at the deep blue sky above. The park's Ferris wheel was slowly turning. Its neon lights twinkled, as beautiful as a fairy tale in the night. She had conducted so many deals in her years as a businesswoman, signed countless contracts, closed countless transactions. But starting today, this new deal she was negotiating was against no one but herself, and what she wanted to win back was not billions in assets. It was the trust of a 5-year-old girl. That was the hardest, and the most worthy prize of all.